Welcome everybody back to another episode of Can You Hear Us' NF2 and You video podcast. Today we are absolutely delighted to be joined by Paula and Donovan of Wellbeing Pilates. So as you probably guessed by now, today we're going to be covering everything you need to know about Pilates. Now Pilates is something that quite a few NF2ers take part in and able to help with balance and various other issues. So today we'll be absolutely picking it apart, and hopefully Paula can tell us everything we need to know. Welcome, Paula. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I guess the first question really is, so many people who don't do Pilates have no idea what it is. So can you start by just explaining to us a bit about what Pilates is?
Okay, it's a form of movement that was developed by Joseph Pilates back in the 1930s onwards. He did a lot of work with POWs, and then he started training the police in self-defense. He was himself growing up a sort of sickly child, so he taught himself how to move well and to use his breath, and generally learned what worked for his body and developed that and extrapolated out to the wider community, eventually working with people with complex needs, and in particular ballet dancers.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, if you went to a local gym or if you went to, I don't know, like a specialist or something, you turn up and of course there are people who have varying needs and who tend to be in an older age bracket taking part. And I think so it confuses people who may be younger with additional needs, looking at it and go, well, that's not really for me, is it? That's for older people. And I think, you know, particularly before I started doing Pilates, was knowing the difference between Pilates and yoga, because you see most people standing on one foot and you're like, whoa, it's the same thing, don't you? So why is that difference? How do people know like what they're getting into?
It is difficult, particularly if you're going to formal gym classes. Yeah, we do stand on one foot sometimes in Pilates, but not all the time. Really, the difference is yoga, well, initially it was a spiritual practice. So there's a lot of concentration on focusing on being still.
It's a nice bit of cultural appropriation, isn't it, really, that we've taken there?
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly when we've started calling it exercise, when really that shifted the focus of it completely. But so the difference is that Pilates is what we call dynamic, because we're looking at moving, whereas yoga tends to look at being still and maintaining one position and breathing through it. With Pilates, we're trying to move functionally in a way that suits your body and suits your life.
And it's interesting, you know, that word functional, because I think that's really descriptive for a lot of people, isn't it? Because actually, I had no idea about Pilates until I started working with a physiotherapist.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, particularly working with NHS physios, they have a lot of limitations, you know. I mean, I'm based in Wales now, and, you know, physiotherapy is unlimited. You can have as many sessions as you like. But in England, you're restricted to 3 meals.
Really restricted.
Yeah, you know, particularly after my spinal cord surgery, which was, 15, 16 years ago. And, you know, after that, I was in an intensive rehab unit for about 6 weeks, having physio 3 times a day. Yeah. And then I left, and all of a sudden, relying on 3 sessions of physio in the community, you know, and that was really challenging. And so I was expressing my concerns with the physio and saying, you know, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to maintain this. And they recommended that I try Pilates. And just the similarities for the things that you do in physiotherapy that you do in Pilates, it's startling. Like when I first started, I thought this is basically the same thing, isn't it? I mean, what's your experience been with that?
What, working with physios?
Well, and also people who use Pilates as physio.
Well, I'm particularly focused or interested in working with people in rehabilitation, really. That's my particular interest. A lot of Pilates teachers work with a physio because we kind of carry on the work where, as you say, they've got to finish because of their contracts with the trust, and they tell their patients, go to a Pilates teacher because they will carry on, move you forward and keep you developing and evolving.
Yeah, and you know, actually, from a patient, I'll use the word client from now, from a client point of view, you know, it's a conflict, isn't it? Because obviously you want to be proactively participating in your health and the management of your health, but sometimes when you're on your own doing it, it's incredibly tough, you know, and I've learned now over the decade that I've been doing Pilates that I really struggle to maintain it when I'm just doing it by myself or just watching YouTube videos, you know. I feel like because it's so personalized sometimes, and, you know, making sure that the sensitivities that I have in my neck and my spinal cord, the teacher needs to be aware of that. Whereas if I'm doing that at home on my own, and then also the other side is everyone that has physio tends to like slack off a little bit, don't they? So like in the first few weeks they're really motivating, and then it's just like, oh, here we go again.
It's really hard because once you've achieved your aim, so maybe if you were thinking, well, I need to walk again in a better way or quicker or whatever, when you've achieved that, you kind of slacken off because you think, well, I've done that. Whereas if you go to a teacher or a class, there's somebody who's continually trying to develop you and show you how you can explore your range of movement and keep pushing, because we're all degenerating. Even the healthiest person, our muscles are getting older and they're getting weaker, and we have to keep pushing through. And then if you've got other complex needs or trauma around the body or psychological trauma, that all plays a part in sort of making you falter and think, oh, I don't want to do this day, or I can't do this. Or so you need somebody who's saying, try again, or maybe try it this way. We'll achieve the same thing, but in a different way. So
I think that's a really good point, because that goal setting thing, I know for me personally, if I don't have a goal I'm working towards, I just feel so lost. You know, it's like that purpose, to have something to aim to. And, you know, when I first started, like you say, there's like a whole evolution. So my needs when I first started are massively different to what my needs are now. And I think I don't think I ever reached a saturation point. It's almost like, okay, I started here, this is what I need to achieve. Now I've gone that, what's my next step? Now I've done that, what's my next step? And I don't feel like throughout this whole decade that I've not learned anything new in Pilates. And sometimes things need to be revisited as well, you know. I think particularly when you have I'm going to say communication issues in your body. So, you know, sometimes the body will communicate certain movement and certain things in certain ways. And it's almost like sometimes your body and your brain is a little overloaded with too many instructions, so it can focus on one thing and then you forget something else. So it's almost like you need to revisit those things anyway, don't you? One of the things that I was really, really interested to pick your brain about was We've seen so much research now going into Pilates, because actually a lot of Pilates instructors are also physiotherapists,
Yes,
and
yes.
vice versa. And so people and organisations and health bodies are beginning to recognise, actually there's something here, and there's been a lot of money being thrown into research around this, particularly for people with neurological conditions.
Yeah.
And I was reading that the MS Society are actually funding research on this, and they're actively recommending that people with MS take part in Pilates as a way of improving their health and well-being, and also for balance issues and neurological feedback, and also with Parkinson's as well. So I think it's made me a bit fascinated about some of the underlying functions internally about how we work, and about how Pilates helps those systems.
Yeah. So Pilates, when you go to your first class, they'll tell you that there's an A, B, C, and that's what Pilates is all about. So it's alignment, so making sure your skeleton is in the right, stacked up the right way to resist gravity. So all the time, gravity from the wherever, I don't understand science, is pushing you down. And that means we start to go, so you've got gravity, we do this. And then the whole balance of your body has to adapt, because your brain wants to stay upright and your body starts moving and sort of giving in to life. And then our muscles suffer because our brain is saying, no, get up. So we start going like gravity. And so we're doing this because we're trying to look up, but we haven't thought, oh, I need to move my head and get stronger.
It blows your mind a little bit, doesn't it, when you think of it in that way? Because we kind of take for granted about the way our body works and the way it responds. Seeing it visually like that kind of makes you think, whoa, that's like every tiny impact, isn't it?
It's true. So the second thing is the B for breathing, because we recognize how much feedback our breath gives our brain and our nervous system, how you use breath as energy for certain movements. There's just so many, I mean, breath is such a complicated thing. So we start to teach our students about that, how to benefit from breathing. You know, we all think, oh, I can breathe, but it's useful to learn more and to focus sometimes on your breath. And then the C is about what we call centering, which is, everybody else thinks, oh, it's holding your tummy muscles in, stomach, but it's your whole trunk.
Yeah.
So it's your ribs, your pelvis, your abdomen, and your spine muscles. So those are the basics, and then we teach the movements to help develop all that. And I've forgotten your question.
I actually don't think there was one. I think I was just like waffling away and I handed it over. So I want to pick up on your point talking about the trunk there, because I know for many people with NF2 particularly, you know, I mean, NF2 is described in many different ways: a rare disease, a neurological condition, a balance disorder. So there are so many different ways to be able to describe NF2 or what it is. But actually, a lot of people will identify balance being one of the biggest movement-related issues in NF2. And I think largely that has obviously to do with the acoustic neuro, well, they're called vestibular schwannomas now. They keep changing the names of everything. But the vestibular schwannoma obviously impacts the vestibular nerve, and that's an important part of the balance system. And then there's also visual difficulties that can be associated. So then that affects eye movement, which is also part of the balance system. And then, of course, you have neuropathy issues as well, which affects the sensory feedback in the balance system. So balance seems to be this huge thing with NF2. And for me, when I was having physio before I moved into Pilates, everything was focused on the trunk, particularly when it came to walking. And I don't think I really understood how much Pilates really helps the trunk and helps build that strength. Also, I think, like even with the breath work, as you say, you know, if we don't think about these things actively and consciously, it's like we take that for granted until something interrupts our ability to be able to do that normally. So talk to me a little bit about the balance system and about how Pilates can address those three elements of how balance works.
So you're right, your balance, it comes from the eyes, or the feedback the brain gets from the eyes. It comes from the vestibular system within the inner ear, and our proprioceptive system, which is, it's your body's understanding of where the body is in space. So it's very much, we focus on the feet, but of course you've got nerve endings all over, and it's your awareness of what's, so if you feel a breeze on your arm, that feedback helps you understand where you are.
My neurosurgeon was explaining just the movement that you showed us earlier about having your head like this. And he said, actually, it's now become a really common 21st century thing on the phones. And it's just so more and more people are benefiting from movement, exercise and movement tools, because they're experiencing the same issues. And of course, people with NF2, some may relate to this, some may not. But that inability also to confidently and what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to say it confidently as well, walk in darker situations, because we're not getting as much visual feedback. And so I find that really, really fascinating. And I think for me, I don't know that I've ever reached the point of being confident in that situation, but I certainly I'm certainly more stable in dimmer situations. When it's completely dark, no chance. You know, but being able to work on trusting my feet, and I think this actually started when I started doing things like wakeboarding, and actually it was the first time where I started learning how important feedback from feet was, and I think I'd really written over that in my mind when I was doing Pilates, you know. And so visual feedback, I'm really interested in getting your take on this, because my only experience with this in Pilates context is when I'm doing classes, having a strategy about where my eyes are looking. And obviously being deaf, that has its own challenges. You kind of have to like pause a little as you're watching what the instructor's doing, and then go back and do it yourself. And then you have to put this extra layer in of, right, where are my eyes looking, and make sure you're having that fixed point as you're doing that. And it takes a lot of work because we're so easy to get distracted by visual noise, aren't we? But I'm really interested to hear your take from an instructor's point of view.
About the visual cue, I think, so I would, if somebody I know has got, is becoming dependent on their sight, the thing is to take their focus down to their feet and start, and just saying, well, think about where your little toe is and your big toe is. Focus on that, and then balance. But straight away, people have got a solid feedback that they can keep in their mind. And that helps take some of the pressure off the eyes and what the eyes are doing. And then thinking, so we're teaching you about your alignment. So it's getting the confidence that if your ribs are here and your hips are underneath, so you've got your head's on top, straight away you're in a good position to be balanced. And then if your feet, so your ankles are under each hip, like a chain, you're balanced. There's just no way you can't be. And as you start to learn that, you become more confident and you begin to learn how you can maintain that balance and start using your eyes to look around. So it's just a slow development. It's learning what your body can do and what it will do if you start focusing on different things. And then eventually you can put it all together and suddenly it's like, oh, okay.
I think sometimes, you know, people like quick fixes, don't they?
Yeah, and it's not a quick thing.
No, and I think people forget that learning as a process takes time.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're not going to go to one Pilates class and suddenly they can start, you know, tiptoeing or whatever. And I know there will be people watching it who will be saying, well, I can't do this and I can't do this because of this and this. And I think from my view, you know, you look at exercises and you explain them in such a simple, eloquent way, like you just have, and people go, no way that's going to make a massive difference. No way. But, you know, we see things like, even if you translate that into another context, like workplace health and safety, right? And even the simple thing of sitting in your chair and sitting with good posture, it changes everything. You know,
it really does.
How can we not understand that that's the same with Pilates? So I know there were skeptical people watching, thinking, well, you know, it can't have that much of a difference. But when I'm really glad that you brought up about consistency, because again, it's one of those things, you know, and I think for many NF2ers, hearing is obviously a very important part of people's lives, and losing that hearing, people strive towards that hearing preservation. And, you know, there are lots of options when people may have lost their hearing, particularly if you think about cochlear implants and technological aids. And it's almost as if people are sometimes more willing to understand that that process takes time. Because your brain has to relearn that hearing. But maybe not necessarily think that the same applies to anything else you're trying to teach your body to do. And that's
it's important to remember that whatever's happened, your body has to adapt. And maybe if you've injured yourself or whatever, you've had years and years of your body adapting to that, and then you're changing, years and years and years and years of change. You're having to sort of get it back again, and like you say, your brain has to sort of like, okay, we'll do this differently now, but it takes time.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that message about how those benefits can come, and also talking about confidence, because this is something actually that I personally believe is such a huge factor in people not just participating, but also maybe pushing themselves a little bit in these contexts, you know. And, you know, you think about, obviously, we're not medical professionals. We can't give, you know, clinical advice, medical advice to people, and people obviously have to discuss things with their practitioners, you know. But sometimes we forget how much control we also have over our health management, if you like. And I think one of the things that plays into that is the confidence, because, you know, for many people with any neurological or balance issues, but obviously here in the context of NF2 is many people are assessed on what they can and can't do. That sort of functional assessment, you know, can sometimes lead people to believe that they just can't do those things.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, sometimes it may be a case of maybe you can't do them like you used to, but actually you can train your brain to do ways of doing things. Do you find that a lot with your clients?
Oh, definitely. With just so many people, their confidence about their body has just, even it's from school days when the PE teacher would say, oh, for God's sake, come on, you can jump higher, or you're never picked for the team. Why? Oh, well, I'm not as good as they are. I get people who come in and say, well, I'm not very good at this exercise. And you think, who says, you know, what's the perfect way? It's your way is the right way for you, and that's fine. And how you feel about that. And I think just gently encouraging people, like containing their fears about moving is just a wonderful thing. And you see people develop and they get more confident, and it's just fantastic.
For me, that expectation is such a big thing, I think, for people's experiences of taking part in something like Pilates, because, you know, you always tend to compare yourself with other people, don't you? And I think for me that
you froze a bit there.
Oh, sorry, I just had a flag as well saying that my internet was unstable.
Much like ourselves.
We're doing well, both country bumpkins. I think one of the things when we talk about expectations is, you know, trying to remove some of the BS that your brain's telling you, you know, about.
Oh, absolutely. And also, it's such, you're so vulnerable with movement because everybody can see. It's not like writing your diary or something where it's all your thoughts, they're in your head. People can't criticize you for that because they don't know. But they can see, or we feel, everybody's looking at me. Oh, I can't do it like her, you know. And it's important for people to realize that it's your body, it's how your body works, and we're all different. You know, I can put one leg around my neck, wow, fantastic, but what's the point? You know?
And, you know, we'll see it in action, don't we? You know, we'll go to classes and we hide right in the back because we don't want people to see us, you know. And really, if you put yourself in the reverse situation and you say, well, am I personally sitting here judging everyone else? No.
Yeah, exactly. You're not.
Do you think everyone's paying attention to you? It doesn't work like that. No one cares. No one cares what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that's a nice thing about Pilates because it focuses you internally and it gives you time and permission to think about your body and how you're moving it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what's really nice is I've never sort of experienced, like I used to work in the fitness industry for nearly a decade, and a lot of judgment goes on there, you know. So I think we kind of build this sort of preconceived idea that translates into anything exercise related, don't you? And the industry as a whole as well, gearing towards perfection and various things. And I think this is one of the things that I found such a breath of fresh air with Pilates, because people tend to go to Pilates because they have specific difficulties or specific things they want to look at and work on in terms of their movement. So there's almost like that solidarity, you know. And I think Pilates is probably the only class I've ever been to where people who will know what your goals are and they celebrate that with you, you know. I think for me, you know, when I first started my Pilates journey, I had a goal and it's really ridiculous. It was really ridiculous, but it was like my thing. I wanted to be able to stand on one leg, right? And for some people, no one cares about being able to stand on one leg, but for me, I had
Yeah.
fixated on this being a goal for me. And throughout that journey, people in my class, they knew, you know, that I had more difficulties with balance at that point, and that I was gearing towards that as my goal. And every single time I got closer, I mean, that took me 6 months, you know, and every time I get closer to that, everybody's, you know, celebrating you and, you know, cheering you on. And it was such a wonderful atmosphere that was just really supportive, you know. But I think one point being, you know, is like you said, Pilates is so individualized. And everyone has their own journey, and you have to be able to go into this situation completely unconcerned with what other people are doing or what you think other people are thinking, you know. I've gone completely off on a tangent there. But pulling back on track, I want to talk about the benefits of Pilates, because we've talked a lot about some of the functions of Pilates and how that helped certain systems. But as a person, if I was thinking about joining a Pilates class or, you know, seeking out a teacher, what would I think? What would be my expectations and what I could benefit from that?
That's a hard question. I mean, there are lots of benefits, but they're very global, and sometimes you don't realize because you've been focusing on one area and it's suddenly you think, well, actually, these other things are better as well, because it's such a holistic way of moving. What's the benefit? Well, your focus improves. I really, really believe that. Your awareness of your body and how your body moves, that improves. That means you feel more confident because suddenly you know, actually, I can do this, and I can stand on one leg. My arms are strong. You know, there are things that are improving all the time, and that makes you feel more confident. That improves your mood, and you know, psychologically it has benefits because you feel more empowered generally.
Yeah, and if I was sitting here watching this, having never done Pilates before, and thinking, well, I've got balance problems, I walk into the doors all the time, I fall quite a lot, you know, and you know, I struggle with walking and gait and all those things. In what ways does Pilates help those things?
So walking's quite complicated. You'd have to look at the chain. Usually if there's problems, it's either starts at the hip or the ankle, and the knee is the sufferer because it's in the middle. So you have to analyze your clients walking. You maybe watch them coming in, see what's happening, where their alignment is. Is it like this or this? How's that affecting the rest of their body? We'd start to look at feet. So initially we maybe get spiky ball, do some foot massage, and start feeling what's happening, the person themselves. You know, how does that feel? Does it hurt? What's that feel like to you? Where? You know, maybe one person puts their foot there and they feel it in their knee, or they feel it under their heel, or just, so that helps us learn how your body is responding to different things. And then we would just start looking at balance issues. What's creating the problem? Is it your hearing? Is it your eyes? Is it your alignment? What's happening in your body? And we just start adapting things to match and try and improve that part of the body that's not functioning as well as it could.
And what's interesting about the way that you're responding, Paula, is actually this is the sort of response you almost would see from a physiotherapist. Having an individual, I want to say training program, but care program, whatever you want to call it. And so I guess that leads me to ask, and I don't know if this is a controversial question for instructors or not, but about the pros and cons of classes versus a one-to-one instructor.
Well, Obviously, one-to-one, you get a full up to an hour of focus on your body. And for some people, that's really, really helpful because there is a psychological element as well. In a class, so a registered qualified Pilates teacher will not teach more than 12 people in a group.
Interesting.
Because it's impossible. You cannot keep an eye on more than 12 bodies. I mean, even that is your maximum. And that's hopefully relatively fit people. I don't mean fit as in running height. I mean people with relatively few other problems. So normal people with just wear and tear type problems, you know. So, and ideally, I mean, myself, I quite like a class of 6. You can focus on the individual and there's still some camaraderie amongst the group. So it becomes a little bit more sociable. I would say if you could afford it, start off one-to-one and then slowly go into a group when you feel confident. And like we can all have a laugh as well, because laughing is really good for relaxing the body. It works the breath and the stomach muscles. You know, it's really good for you.
There's a whole industry around laughing, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is remarkable. The very first time I heard of like laughter yoga and laughter therapy, I was like, is this but one of the things I want to touch on just quickly about that is the instructor's role in a class. So, for example, some people who are watching may want to know what they expect in a class or what they can expect in a class. And we'll talk in a minute about sort of before you go to the class, but I didn't realise, naively or not, how, not hands-on, that's not the right word, but really how attentive Pilates instructors are, because in in many other exercise classes, you go, the instructors, they're thinking you're copying them, and you know, with Pilates, it's not that. I mean, I've been some maybe not so good Pilates classes that have really mimicked that. But I didn't understand that it was a very normal and good practice thing for the instructor to be walking around as people do their exercises, to be able to individually go to people and say, you just need to move your hip a little bit further in that direction, or think more about raising your core and your pelvic muscles.
That's right, yeah.
And I think, you know, I think it's really important for people to have that expectation that it's not that you just stand up and it's not interactive. You know, you don't just copy what people are doing.
No, that's what we say. You don't pay us to watch us exercise. We watch you exercise and we improve, adapt. You know, there's lots of different ways that we have interventions, some like physical, some just a verbal cue. You know, you like myself, I do Pilates most days, and you think something, even a roll down where you flex the back of the spine, relatively simple, you'd think, but I still kind of mentally watch myself. I think, oh, I'm not doing this right. Oh, I need to change that. You know, because our bodies get tired. Some days we feel good, some days we're not. Sometimes we're just fed up, we can't be bothered, and that affects how you move. So it's useful to have another person looking at you and saying, so last week you did that really well. This week, maybe you're a bit tired and we need to do it a different way. Or, for example, I had somebody who had literally one leg, I think 5 or 2 centimeters shorter. So it's like, so then, we'll use a block. So we have one leg here, one leg here. So then we've got the alignment right. And they can, for that particular moment, feel in their body how it could feel. And that's what you can maybe think about in the future. You know, it's
You know, some of these very, very, very minor adaptations that you
minor
add in
things.
to almost
Yeah,
anything. You know,
yeah,
there were some circumstances. I mean, your point there about some days being better than others,
yeah.
and that expectation I feel is really important for out
Mm-hmm.
there, because, you know, just using the example of me wanting to stand on one leg, you know,
Yeah.
and now I look back at my goal and think, oh my God, did I really do that? Was
No,
that
no,
really
but
my
to
goal?
stop
But
you
yeah,
there, because standing on one leg is a really useful thing to do. How do you put your tights on or your socks on in the morning? You
yeah,
really want to have to sit down every time. If you're on the beach,
yeah,
so much better if you can stand up and still
yeah.
stand on one leg and put your sock on. So it's a really functional thing to do.
Honestly, it really is. And, you know, I can't sit here confidently and declare, oh, I can stand on one leg for one period of time. Some days I can, some days I can't.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
really like what you touched on there about your mood and some
yes,
days being tired, because there are some days where I've got a brain fog
yeah,
and I can't even stand up without swaying around, you know, so
yeah,
every
yeah,
day differs.
yeah.
And there are some times that I'm able to achieve that goal
Mm, mm,
for a few seconds. Sometimes
yeah,
I can put
yeah.
my pants on without falling over or leaning on anything. But the important thing is recognizing and
Yes,
the expectation shouldn't be that
yeah,
once you achieve one thing, it's consistently going
that's
that way,
right.
with that
Yeah,
work,
yeah.
with
It's
that
it's a
effort.
constant.
Yeah, exactly, you know.
Yeah,
And even when I was doing classes, sometimes I would have I want to say rail. It was like less formal,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it was like a rail to be able to hold on to when there
yeah,
were exercises that needed to have one foot or whatever ways. And
yeah.
even that small adaptation, whilst I wasn't doing the same as
Absolutely.
other people in
Yeah,
class, I
yeah,
was still working a lot of different
yeah,
functional movements
yeah.
just to do it in that way, you know. And I thought that was brilliant.
And that's a nice thing with smaller classes, because you can watch your clients come in and you think, the energy today seems a bit low. We
Uh,
won't badger them. We'll just screw up the lesson plan and work a different way today.
That was really responsive, isn't it? You know, and I
Yeah,
can say that I found the same for other exercise classes that I've done, you know, and I think, you know, I've done Pilates for a long time. I've had a massive gap without Pilates, you know, through
yeah,
COVID, and
mm,
that's been really challenging for me because steadily I'm not walking as much. Steadily I'm not doing, you know, my
yeah, yeah,
exercises and things, and I've seen a tangible decline in my balance
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
also my proprioception, you know. So I'm walking into more things now.
yeah,
I'm tipping over more, and we have that thing, don't we? I mean, I know I know whether NF2ers experience it as well, where you stand up and you just tip forward, you know. And so
yeah,
those things have actively declined for me through
yeah,
COVID, because I've had
yeah.
that stretch of not maintaining it. So I
Mm.
think, I don't know, from your point of view as a professional, you know, about being aware that if you, I mean, I don't know if I'm accurate or not, if you do like one course of Pilates, if you like, or a period of time where you're doing Pilates, is that as effective, you know, or would you recommend that people use this as a regular and consistent way of maintaining it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I really do believe in Pilates and the power of Pilates and the benefits. But really, with anything, you have to just keep going. It's like learning a language. It's like anything you want to do well and you want benefits from, you just have to be consistent. And it's really, really boring and it's really tough sometimes, but just a small thing. So even if you think there's no way I'm going to lie on the floor and do loads of bloody exercises
Uh,
today, I would stop thinking about it as exercise. I'd think about it as movement.
uh,
Forget. that word, get rid of it, because we've just got so many associations with that word. And just even thinking about using your pelvic floor when you put the kettle on, that's something. It's something that will help your trunk and your core, and maybe that's enough today. Or hold on to the sink, stand on one leg, you know, anything, any small thing. And then when you feel better, get back to it again, do a bit more.
It's almost like ingraining it in your life, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. So, you know, when I first started learning, you know, I used to go up to London, and when the tube came along, I'd be thinking about how am I standing? And I'd be like, every 2 minutes.
Oh,
Now, hopefully I stand better. I don't know.
I'm laughing because some of the movement techniques, obviously, that I've learned throughout Pilates, particularly around where I hold my pelvis,
Yes.
and about how that connects to where my knees are, where my ankles are.
Yeah.
And so when I'm standing in queues, I find myself doing the same thing, going, hold on, where's my pelvis? Right, let's check that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's make sure my core's engaged. I find myself, you know, just moving around a little bit and going, right, that feels right, that feels right. And of course, no one else can see what I'm doing, but
no, thank God. But the other thing with consistency is, sadly, you know, your body is just constantly deteriorating as we get older. So balance is like a muscle. You have to practice it. Even if you're the most healthy person in the world, when you become 50, 60, 70, your balance is just going to go if you don't keep working on it.
And I'm really glad you talked about the word exercise as being something that needs to be checked out the window, because the word is kind of synonymous with so many expectations around what you should and shouldn't be experiencing. You know, people think exercise is being around fitness goals, about if you don't exercise, you're not healthy, you know, and so we start to see a lot of negative connotations with it all. And actually, like you say, you go to the core of it. This is about movement. Watch how you're moving, think about how you're moving, feel how you're moving, you know. And it took me a long time personally to really understand that, because I did look at it as exercise for a long time, and it was only when I started to sort of shift that mindset a little bit, so I became really focused on sort of smaller goals with each exercise. So there's one, I'm not very good with the names of the exercise, but I think it's like bridging, so lying on the back with your knees up, and you know, having that ball in your knees and trying to do that without shaking.
A lot of work.
Oh my goodness. And you do something that's really easy, and you do it, you're like, oh gosh.
I know that feeling. I used to have it. Now I still have it. I'm lying down and I'm sweating.
That's like the biggest explosion of what people expect of Pilates versus what the reality is, isn't it? It's almost like each exercise in itself becomes a little challenge. I'm going to get the best of me on this one. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. So 4 weeks later, you manage it and you're like, go! It's amazing.
It is amazing. And the original Pilates way was he had a sequence of 24 movements, and you did each one, you flowed, you didn't have a stop, start, you flowed. When you've done one perfect movement, move on. Don't keep doing the same again. Just work, achieve that perfection each day, then move on to the next one. So your practice could be half an hour, or it could be up to an hour, because there were some movements you felt, I could do that better.
And do you think, actually, this is strapped curiosity now, is that why sort of traditionally you would see Pilates courses. So if you, like, instructors would advertise and say, right, our next course of 6 weeks
Yes,
is this.
yeah.
Is that what
definitely.
that's related to?
I think so, yeah, because it is a development, it's an evolution, you know, it's changing. And yeah, you're having to learn so much because each physical movement has a breath movement with it. And you're thinking about alignment, you're just thinking about so many things. And it's easier if you start at the beginning and build and build and build and build and build.
So I guess the next question then is, does every Pilates class follow that model, or is this some you can just join anytime?
If you're at the gym,
And I
it's
want to
Steve. You can
talk
drop in,
about
drop out,
this.
drop in, drop out.
I want to talk about this actually
Yeah.
because I don't want to sort of be sanctimonious about it. I hope it doesn't come across in that
Yeah.
way. But the differences between either going to your local gym where they may have a Pilates class versus going to a Pilates studio that focuses specifically on Pilates. And I guess that's really the main thing I want to get your views on, because I know the whole ideal, I think from my perspective anyway, would be to have a one-to-one instructor. That is my ideal anyway for me. And but some people are in a position where their access is either a gym or a Pilates studio. And so talk to us a little bit about what and how those expectations of those might differ.
So, I mean, myself, I have experience working in a gym, and it didn't go well for me because I was lucky. I started at the beginning of COVID, so there was lots of social distancing. So the room could only accommodate up to 6 people, but those people were gym bunnies, and they had very, very different ideas about what they should be doing compared to other Pilates instructors who'd come from more from the fitness background. So that was difficult, but they started to like the way I was teaching. They liked the body control method. Then the gym was like, oh, rules have changed. We're going to move to a different room and it can accommodate up to 24. And I was like, impossible, can't do it. So I just think, and I have done a class before at a gym, but it was with a Pilates teacher who'd also done the body control method. And she was very good, and she didn't allow drop-ins. But it depends on the gym's attitude about that, because they want money.
Well, they're revenue machines, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I'd be careful about going to a gym, particularly if you have NF2 or similar other complex needs. The Pilates studio, I think ideally, because you can opt into a course. So you start right at the beginning and you develop, or one-to-ones are there.
And I think it's really interesting because sometimes that poses a bit of a logistical issue for people. So if you are living in central London, I mean, you're more likely to have access to all these things, you know. If you live in the middle of the countryside, you know, in a really rural area, you might go to say a local village hall, or keep an eye out for local Pilates instructors. I know for me, I mean, I live in rural North Wales, and we still are lucky enough to have a Pilates studio in the nearest town. You know, that even that distance for me sometimes is a bit challenging. But for me, what that poses a little bit of not a concern, but something to be mindful of, is about how people access Pilates. So some people might go to YouTube, or they might go to buy a book. You know, we have thousands of books on Pilates, and they try and almost self-teach with Pilates. What would be your advice to those people on that?
I really don't know what to say, because you're right. For some people, it's hard to access a person directly. My worry is with a book or YouTube, you're working to another person's pace. And it's just so much to take in. Perhaps a book would be better because you can read it, assimilate it, look at the pictures. Whereas if you're watching a video, you're having to keep up.
Yeah.
Or keep stopping, starting.
And what's your views on a sort of self-teaching thing? Do you think that's something that people can ever achieve the same level as if they had a professional actually working with them?
I don't think so, unless they've been on a course, like they've started and done 6 weeks,
Yeah.
and they've got the basics, and then maybe they can start to teach themselves because they've got that basic awareness of what's going on in their body.
Yeah. And do you think there's, I don't know, I'm in a situation sometimes where I see people who really want to try Pilates and that's their first point of contact. And for me, where I try to sort of say to people, well, actually, you might have a much better experience if you do that on the latter end, if anything. Because I don't know, from my experience, you know, when I go to, or when I first went to a class, that wasn't just about attending the class and learning about Pilates, that was also about breaking my own confidence issue. Once I realised, actually, this is, I can do this. And I was more insistent on going to classes or having that one-to-one support, because I felt like if I was comparing the two together, because I had books, you know, and I had and when I compared the two together, I thought I advanced so much better and quicker actually when I'm with a professional, and I guess that's really the same in any industry you go to, isn't it? You know, but that pace and also having the confidence, because I think sometimes for me, my physical issues are complex. You know, I'm not a Pilates instructor and I'm not in any position to be able to judge what a Pilates instructor knows and how they can manage or get around my issues. But I go in there because, you know, rare disease has this thing where people just tend not to know about stuff that you're experiencing. So you go in with that mindset, they won't have any idea how to be able to deal with the issues that I'm experiencing. And actually for most, it doesn't really matter because you still have a body, you still have the movement, and all of those are really...
I think another thing that makes it hard to self-teach is that wherever the information's coming from, if it's YouTube or a book, we all learn differently and we understand things differently. So, you know, on a book, if they say, oh, you should feel this in a particular place or breathe in here or whatever, maybe your experience is different or you've interpreted what they've said in a way that they didn't mean. And it's the same with YouTube, you know. So if I'm in a class and I can see I've said a cue like, I think about rolling a marble along the floor to lift your neck, and then I can see somebody, they're not doing that. So the way I've described it doesn't suit their vision of the world. I have to think of another way of communicating, you know, and talk about maybe lifting the back of their head up rather than doing that, you know, and just that small things like that can make a big difference to how you experience the movement.
Actually, I can really attest to that because, and I didn't know this for a very, very long time, but the way that I personally feel my core engaging seems to be quite different to how other people feel that. And with anything that we experience in our bodies, we just think, well, everyone, you know, tends to say the same. And it was only as I was talking about the way it feels for me when my core is engaged, and it's a very peculiar feeling. And my first Pilates instructor was like, oh, that's not usual, you know, and actually that probably was a lot to do with nerve damage or nerve issues throughout the system. And that didn't mean that I wasn't doing things right or that I was doing things wrong. It just meant that I felt it and I experienced it in a different way. So the instructor was very quick to be able to say, well, okay, that's right. Your movement is right. So that's the way that you're experiencing it personally. I want to go back to quickly just about the whole exercise versus movement mindset, because Pilates is almost experiencing at the moment that same thing that yoga experienced when it became mainstream, isn't it? You know, Pilates was, I think, viewed as being a sort of minority class or whatever you want to describe it. And then of course you see people like David Beckham who completely attest to how powerful Pilates is in his life, and then thinking about it as a rehabilitation method. And that's where it's going mainstream now, isn't it? About people looking at rehab. And I think that's been such a positive association for people maybe who have additional needs to say, well, hang on a minute, if rehabilitation is normally done through physio and people who are using Pilates is for rehabilitation, actually maybe that's quite applicable to me. You know, do you see many of those fitness associated Pilates users within your I want to say your community work versus your gym work? Does that translate, or do you think that's environmentally related?
Oh, I'm not sure I understand the question.
So do you tend to, like, for example, when you run community classes, which are a bit more focused on I don't know the way to describe it, the way that you prefer to teach Pilates, versus I'm thinking back to the conversation we just had about teaching in gyms. Do you tend to find that that's environmental, so that people maybe who seek community classes are less fitness minded than those who see it in a gym?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and some people at the gym have a different mindset, and they're going because their doctor said you need to get fit or whatever, and they come in to do the Pilates class in the gym with a different expectation. But generally the community class is the preferable way from my perspective.
I think that's really what I was getting at. Thank you for that. Because, you know, people who might be watching this might be saying, well, where's the best place for me to go? And I think I would always tell friends, as an example, always look at the community classes. Because actually you're probably going to get as close to a personalised approach than, you know, you know, I mean, if people had the money to be able to invest into their healthcare, I would always tell people to have one-to-one anyway, but you know, with an option of only being able to attend a class financially or whatever.
Yeah, because you're right, the gym is a commercial thing, and they will be putting on more Pilates classes because it's popular at the moment. And so they'll say, anybody here can teach Pilates? Yes, okay. And their clientele tend to be younger, or tend to be people who want to be running, cycling, climbing mountains, you know, being really like fit. I mean, you shouldn't generalize, but mostly that is their clientele. And they go into the Pilates class expecting sort of like, I don't know, aerobics with balance or something. I don't know what they expect.
Well, actually raises a really good point about what people should be looking for when they're looking for a Pilates instructor. So qualifications wise, if I had never done Pilates before and I was sticking at a class, what do I need to be looking for, particularly if I maybe have neurological or balance issues?
I would, I mean, obviously I'm trained in a particular method. It's, I don't know, do you know this lady? Have you? She started the
Okay. Okay.
right. So, and she was taught by somebody who was taught by Joseph Pilates. And so there's a very strong classical connection with the original Pilates method, which if you watch the videos, it's scary, but it's been evolved and built on and developed in the light of modern day thinking.
Oh my God, I mean, sometimes you look at these videos of Joseph Pilates
Right.
and think,
Whoa.
holy hell.
Right. But maybe we're a bit soft now, I don't know. But
people have moved on with the times, don't worry.
Yes, I promise. But so I know two methods. So there's body control method. I would look on their website. They have a list of teachers with specialisms. There's also the stop method. I know a bit about that. There's other methods. So I would look at those, look at their recommendations for teachers near you. Maybe ask your physio if he knows of a Pilates teacher particularly, rather than just going to the gym.
Yeah.
I think I know there's a particularly good physio who does a lot of Pilates with his physio and adapts it. So you could look at his website. Do you want his name?
Yeah, go for it.
Cameron
Yeah.
Angus.
Okay.
So if you look up him, and he has resources on his website, things for people to look at. A lot of Pilates people, you know, like you say, they focus on particular things. So you'll have people who focus on Pilates for sports, Pilates for pregnancy.
And this is
children.
like in the industry, isn't it? They have their specialisms, don't they?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, if people watching this, maybe they have a look in their local area and they see 3 classes in various village halls, all saying Pilates. How do I know? I mean, research is always really important, isn't it? Would you recommend that people reach out to the instructors, ask them what style of methods to use?
And the majority will say, oh, I know who would suit you perfectly. Or they'll say, let's meet, you, because it is such an individual thing. I think a lot of Pilates teachers will do their own research, ring people, talk to other physios, and then come back and work with you anyway.
And that's brilliant, because that really touches on a best practice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think I've had 2 occasions in the last decade where one instructor said to me, I'm not the right instructor for you.
Yeah.
You need to go to someone who has experience in this. And then I had obviously my physio, and actually she had put together a plan together with me, which was actually involving physio, Pilates and acupuncture. And it was like heaven involved, it really was. So it came to a point where she said, this isn't right for you anymore. You now need to refer you on to community Pilates. And that transition worked really well. And I think going into that research mode, if you like, to try and understand where is best for you, understanding that they will work with you to find the best thing. And if they don't, maybe they're not the right teacher for you anyway. So I think my next question before we ask, I can't believe that's gone so quickly. So I want to speak really to people who haven't done Pilates before. Maybe they're a bit nervous about trying it. You know, what would be your top tips for them?
What if they're thinking about joining a class?
Yes, or starting their journey with Pilates.
Don't need any particular equipment or clothes. So last Christmas on my Facebook page, I had things to do in the queue. You know, imagine you're standing, waiting to pay, you're in the queue. Yes. And that proves that you don't need the right clothes. You know, my husband comes to my class, he's got his jeans on, or maybe his work trousers. I've just about managed to persuade him to take his shoes off. It makes my life difficult, but if that's how he's comfortable, then, you know, you have to work with the person.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that. Your teacher will give you everything you need, but just really comfortable clothes for you. That's it.
Wow, I mean, that sounds like such an accessible journey in that term,
Yeah.
anyway, doesn't it, in terms of getting involved in Pilates. Some people watching this might be thinking about deaf awareness.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can test on certain experiences that I've had that any instructor worth their salt will work with you on communication. And you know,
Definitely.
there is a lot of that, watching what the exercise is what's going on, and then replicating that rather than trying to do it at exactly the same time. So having those strategies in place, but actually it was the instructor that helped me put those strategies in place. Now obviously you're a little bit of a gold standard in this, because you're obviously a VSL interpreter as well, so you have that extraordinary level of deaf awareness, but not just about simply saying, well, we use sign language. Yeah, sometimes that's just not possible in this scenario. But using cues and using certain different communication ways of being able to provide that information, you know. For some people watching it going, well, I can't do that because I can't hear what's going on in class. What advice would you have for them?
I think because of the way Pilates is, it attracts particular types of people. And I think you can teach your teacher as much as they can teach you, if you know what I mean. And I know one of my colleagues, because I work at a studio in Northampton and we see each other's lesson plans, and she's got the name of her client in the group, so-and-so, oh, hard of hearing, make sure she's standing there so that she can see me and I can see her all the time. So it's in the front of your mind. You want your client to learn something, you want them to benefit, so you're happy to adapt to them. And well,
I think that's brilliant, because I hadn't really thought before about the preparation that goes in from an instructor's point of view, because you're going to think, well, the instructor's trained, they turn up to their class and then they teach. But actually, I've never really thought about that side of things, where you're going, well, I work with these specific clients, this is what their needs are, this is what I need to be aware of, and actually kind of diversify that teaching specifically for that person. Would you say that was a best practice goal, or do you find all instructors work towards that?
Well, I mean, I only know about people trained in the method that I'm trained in, and that is just normal. That's how we're taught to work. You always have an individual lesson plan and you have a 6-week plan, because your aim is to move people on, keep them developing. Even if it's just a small thing, just keep working on that. When you've achieved that, let's move on. Let's keep developing.
Brilliant, brilliant. All right, well, I think that's all we've got time for today.
Well, thank you.
Honestly, thank you so much. I think I've learned lots more things and refreshed so many things about Pilates as well. And I hope our viewers have learned so much. And I think more than anything, it's helped just to break down some of those concerns to people that are going forward. What I'll be doing is putting links in the description box on YouTube to Paula's Facebook page as well, doing Pilates. And, you know, there's lots of information on there. There's some videos on there, just some small things that you can be doing in very basic situations. As we've covered in this video as well, there's a lot of options for you to be able to access Pilates. And, you know, and I think I strongly encourage you to go and just give it a try. If you're nervous, try and get over some of that first step nerves talk to the local instructors. You know, that point of sometimes just contacting people can really overcome a lot of those confidence issues. Seek that reassurance, find out what they're trained in, find out what method they use. If you are really concerned, and obviously you want to make sure that things aren't going to be, you know, too dangerous or whatever, you know, speak to your practitioners, healthcare practitioners before, if you want some further advice on things, and making sure that it's appropriate for you. Personally, I've never met a healthcare provider that's not told me that Pilates is good for you, but that would be interesting if anyone does. But please don't let anything hold you back from just finding out more information at least. Thank you so much again, Paula.
Thank you.
Okay now. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.